And why do we need the research question? How do you arrive? A lot of people end up coming to me and saying, and let me use Mr. Aberrant, not you, but the topic, I want to do e-government. What do you think is wrong in saying, I want to do e-government? Just using that as an example. What do you think is wrong there?
It's not specific enough.
It's not specific enough. It's too broad. So what do? How do you look at it and how do you narrow it down? Now a PhD, MPhil or MSc, it could be one research question or no more than two. You do not want to cover everything this world has to offer. It must be narrow and it must be focused. So let's see. And this is what the literature is telling us. It's focused and it's clearly and carefully defined. Now I'm not going to read for you because all these things are online. So we're going back. I want to do a topic on aging. So I'll use Miss Mira right first. I want to do something on aging. The first thing the lecturer or your mentor will ask you is what is so important about aging that you want to do? What you'll say? What you'll say to that? Why do I want to do aging? What is the first thing you do then if you say I want to do aging? Paul. Do you know everything in the world? This week I walked out of a student. I'm not that proud of it. In fact, I'm really proud of it. I tell you, life is short, Dr. Theodore. The student came and said, I am doing voting behavior and I'm saying that race is the most important determinant. And I'm looking at Caroni, I'm looking at San Fernando West, and I'm looking at Tunapuna. And then he starts off with voting behavior in 1925. And I put up my hand and I said, sir, but you can't use 1920. He said, no, I know about that. And then he comes again and he says to me, he said, well, you know, it's universal adult sovereignty. And I said, sir, you're wrong. He said, no, you could call it sovereignty, you could call it you could call it anything you want. I said, all right, good. Then he calls his name Bahadur Singh and he says, well, it's not Bahadur Singh, it's Bahadur Singh. I said, Bahadur Singh. He said, you could call him this or you could call him that. Then he comes back and he says, well, you know, 1946 was a year that was a conflict situation with a lot of racial over. I said, well, please tell me your source. He said, but I read the literature and I know everything and I summarize it right here for you. At that point, I said, excuse me, sir, and you know everything, you really don't need me on your advisory. I'm sorry, I walked off. Life is very short. What is wrong with that? You know, what he was doing wrong? He was taking the point of view that he knew it in the beginning. Nobody knows anything in the beginning. So the first point of call for you is to read. You do not want to recreate an existing wheel. So for instance, if you say, half of the population in Trinidad is aging, I'll watch you and say, well, so okay, what? Everybody knows that. Why would I want to read an entire thesis by you? So the first thing you have to read the literature, find out and say, listen, I'm reading the literature, but there is a gap in the existing literature. And then you come to me and say, Prof, or dog, or anything you want to call me, but respect me, don't call me dog. Say, I want to fill that gap. There is a gap. So and so argue, so and so say, but in most current literature, I have a gap. And girl, I love this thing. I want to do it. Because I'll tell you something, if you do not love what you're doing, it will be painful for you. If you're doing this topic or this thesis because you want that doctor or that MSc behind your name, forget it and walk away. If you want a thesis because you want to do it, you have a burning ambition to do it, you want to find things, that is the student you want. Once you're doing something and it's painful, I will say to you ladies and gentlemen, move away from it. Drop out of the program. Go and do something else. Do not put your life under pain. You put that in the morning and it will be useless. Like what you do. Dr. Theodore, every time you watch my face, he'll stand up with the leadership thing. Why? It's a burning issue. Anytime I watch him, I see corruption. Anytime I see Josh, it's corruption. And we talk about it non-stop. And Josh will say, well, you know, so and so say, and over again, we go through the literature. what who say, you see this, why? We love it. It's part of our psyche, we live it. So the thing about it, what I'm saying to you, find a topic that you will like and that will sustain you. Find something that nobody else has done and say, you see, this is the most important thing in my life, and I want to be the person that breaks this rule. Okay? So, we know what to look for now. What again do you do when you read all the literature and you find it? When you read all this literature and you find this is the one thing, what do you do? Tell me. So, okay, so you have a big problem. We're going back to e-government. E-government, when you're reading, there are a number of dimensions to it. A number of dimensions. What am I looking at? Am I looking at it from a political slant? Am I looking at it from a technical point of view? Am I looking at it from an administrative point of view? Write down each kind of thing you could look at and start narrowing down. If you all are students of political science, you would have understood rationality and how you arrive at a solution. By trial and error, by looking at alternates, weighing the alternates, and arriving at the one topic you want to come up with. Okay? So it's our step by step. It's not simply saying, I want to do voting. I will ask a number of questions. Which aspect of voting you want to look at? When you want to look at it, what is your time period? How you want to look at it from an election and boundaries perspective, an institutional perspective, a people's perspective, a civil society perspective. All these things is what I want to do. But let's narrow down the topic. How you realize how much you narrow down? Then you could go out, and this is why you're all together. This is the family. You could go to Delia, Miss Delia, and say, Miss Delia, I want to do voting behavior now, and I want to look at so and so. And she said, but why you want that? She talks like this. But why you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? And so did that before. Why you want to recreate the wheel? And again, that is so important because your colleague could have perspectives that you don't have. It's very important to look at that. So again, the research question comes up, and constantly you keep asking yourself, what do you do? I will say to you, now is the time we start. Dr. Theodoric, can you add anything to that? To shy?
No.
Okay. So now what we want you to do, get up. We have some scrap paper. Identify a research topic. Identify what you want to do. You realize that we're saving paper, so it's not, it's paper that we use. And just pass it down. The instructors get ready. Let's find out from the instructors. Let's find out from them what are the challenges they had with their research topics.
Or coming up with a topic.
Coming up with a topic.
Actually, my problem was finding what is topical and whether or not the topic was exhausted. So again, part of it, first of all, I started doing leadership in the public sector, looking at women in leadership positions. And after a while, looking at the various literature, you realize that a lot of people wrote on leadership in the public sector from a female perspective. So again, sitting down, having a conversation,
and you all don't have to go to that.
with talking with Mr. Drayton, he said, why not try something else? Or Josh. Why not try something else? So I said, okay, what you think? What is out there? So he told me political marketing, and I like politics because I was exposed to the literature at undergrad level. And that's a next way too. At undergrad level, something might have held your interest. So I've always liked political marketing. So I explored, I spoke to the professor. She said, at this point you could change your topic as well. It's not cast in stone. So I married political marketing, and looking at the literature, you realize that a lot of people wrote on voting behavior, which is my topic as well, but they never brought in the element of political marketing into it. So now my topic is looking at the impact of political marketing tools or techniques on voting behavior and how it has impacted, whether or not political marketing really is the engine that drives political behavior other than race.
And another thing was thrown into her wheels, he spoke of her wheels, is when Mrs. Bissessar spoke about the runoff system. And I panicked and I called her and I said, well, you know, it's a whole new dimension and the thesis is going to come through there. And then we was looking at the 2010 elections and what we realized it was dated. So that whole thing threw a different kind of challenge, a slant into this topic that she was doing. It's a difficult thing to arrive at that research question and put that proposal together, because remember again, we're looking at a period that is it's a time dated. For the MPhils and the PhDs, I should mention this, the supervisor does not have a marking or any way of informing people that this student are giving a mark. Now it's going to be sent out purely to external examiners. We have no say. It means to say your thesis has to stand on its own. We will not even be there to help you with your defense. It means that if your thesis is bad, you fail. You will fail. And when you fail, there's no chance of coming back. So be very cautious that this is happening. So this was her journey. I think we have something worthwhile, but again, the dimensions change as you start. Constantly change.
Marlene, that was in your master's or your
No, my master's was in HRD, in
All
public
right.
sector. So this is a totally different area.
Yeah.
But what is exciting, I'm now trailing the 2015 general election, and then the runoff is a new addition to the
And new literature
and
will
new
be coming
literature.
in. So
Have to
constantly.
build.
And of course, what she's going to do is now her methodology. We're going in her methodology stage. She has finished the proposal stage. It took nearly a year because you had to cover everything in that proposal. It means to say now with that stage, she will now be going into which marginal constituency we're going to test, how we're going to hold my variables constant. And again, that will be a new dimension that we will look at. So thanks, Professor Mitchell.
I think, can I say something?
Yes,
Yes,
Doctor.
I think Marlene hit the nail on the head when she said that as an undergraduate student, your area of interest could be, you could recognize that. Because as a student, I tell students if they come to the university and you go through a 3-year undergraduate period or even more sometimes, and you something in some area, if that does not hold your interest, then you just perhaps came to do a degree and get out of here. At some point in time, some course, some topic, some issue, some concern must grab you. And I think that can drive the research, your postgraduate research, right? Because my experience, I mean, as a student, I came here to do sociology. And I changed from sociology to government. And primarily because of my interest in political thought. And I sat in a class and, you know, I always loved politics, but not that kind of passionate, want to be a practicing politician or such. But I was always concerned about third world development, you know, and issues that affected the third world. And I think that is what led me to conduct the postgraduate research that I did. So I had that in mind from very early, you know, what you want to do. Once you sit in the lectures, you know, something must grab you, something must hold your interest. And I think that can give you the focus to eventually what you want to do. There must be some question that you want to ask. Something you want to answer in relation to some issue that keeps nagging at you all the time. And I think that is what can give you the question. And once you get that question, I think you can then begin to narrow it down into exactly what you want to do and what you really want to find.
Thanks, Dr. Dillon. Simone is still grappling with her research question and her proposal. And she will tell you why, because she started on one and something happened.
This is with PhD.
Yeah.
because it happened to me and too.
Hi. So I have a problem making up my mind. I admit that. I have varied interests. Lots of things catch my attention, and sometimes it's hard to pin it down. When I did my MPhil, I had gotten a fellowship to do HIV research. So that would have put me in the direction of looking at, my research question actually looked at HIV, and we just had to pick a topic. So I ended up eventually looking at the institutional arrangements governing the national HIV/AIDS response in Trinidad and Tobago. The funny thing is, I had started that in 2004, I can't remember. I was part-time for that working, got married, had kids, etc. And the funny thing is, the NACC got shut down just as I was about to finish and submit. Woo. And I just raised that because Dr. Raghunath said something about time. Sometimes time is your friend and sometimes it is your enemy. The longer you take to do something, the more things could happen to totally derail your research and to make it, I have to say, irrelevant. Okay? But luckily I had already finished, and the way we had written it, it was as if I was talking about the HIV/AIDS problem because I had already put it in a time frame. I think it was 2000 to 2008 or something like that. So I was okay. But if I had not done that initially, I would have been in a real bad way because it would not have been relevant anymore. At least the information that I had captured.
I think if your proposal wasn't sound,
yeah,
it would have
fallen apart. But because it was tight in the beginning, I was able to continue. I started the PhD, and then I took a leave of absence. So I've already been in the program for like a year and a half. My first proposal, I love the topic of ethnicity, but my background is not sociology. My background is political science, government. I started to do the literature review. I did a proposal. I went into it, because I love ethnicity, and then I began to realize, but wait, I don't know anything about sociology because the more I read, the more I realized I had to know about sociology. And the only sociology course I ever did was in postgrad political sociology when I was in my MPhil. And quite frankly, I don't like it. So when I said, and I read volumes, I bought the books, because I was sold on the topic, because I was looking at ethnic conflict in a third world country, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, Simone, let's be real. Because if you have a defense for this, you're going to fail, because I don't know nothing. And there's only so far you can win it, right? Especially for defense, for PhD. So I scrapped that, and after talking to Prof, taking a walk away from it for a while, talking to Prof, she said to me, I don't know if you remember this, I always crawling about foreign affairs, why I don't write about them. Because I always talk about all the crap that's wrong with the ministry. And that was one thing that I was very passionate about, all the things that was wrong in the place that I work. There are many things that are wrong. And we came up with the research question, the constraints of foreign policy implementation. So that's actually what I'm looking at now. But after doing and being in the field and a practitioner, it's very easy for you to sit down, having the information at the fingertips, being able to scan the horizon and seeing what topics are actually important, what is topical at this time. So that's you look at it, and you may have a little more information on something that may have caught your interest in undergrad or in a course you're doing now. You say, no, I like this, I'm really immersed in this, I know what's going on in this field, I know the literature. It might be easier for you then to pick a question. So it was very easy for me to identify the problem. There are certain things that in the ministry that prevent the foreign policy of Trinidad and Tobago from being implemented.
But then she has to narrow that foreign policy to a
Exactly.
specific policy, eh?
Exactly, because there are many versions. And trust me, they don't even have it written down. And that's one of the things that are wrong. So that's where I'm at now, because I had to scrap the first proposal I did and start over from scratch. So just within the last few weeks, I started to look at the literature again to reformulate it. So by the end of the semester, I should be able to hand up a new proposal and do my first presentation on this topic.
If the proposal is not correct, ladies and gentlemen, if it's not correct, any good supervisor will tell you, if the proposal is not tight, you should not go forward. It's too risky to go forward with a proposal that is weak. Many people think that they should bypass, and a lot of my students have been doing it. Bypassing the proposal, I want to jump into the thesis. By the time you jump into it and you start looking at the review of the literature, you find it weak, you don't have nothing to stand on. And then they start grappling all over the place. The same thing with your methodology. If your methodology, and I don't know who teaches methodology, Dr. Kevin, I think you're very good, but they must come to him. If you have a wrong lecturer, and I know it comes from bad lecturers, if they're teaching you the wrong thing, your thesis will be flawed, and you will go through a lot of horrors. So understand what is happening to you. You need to get things correct. You need to get your methodology correct. You need to pin it down correctly. If you don't do that proposal correct, you will fail. You cannot carry through that thesis. It will be painful for you. and it will just flop. Thanks. Mr. Director? I think you always wanted to do corruption.
Yeah, I guess for the most part. But I think there are a number of things that you have to think about before you even come up with a research question or a topic. Firstly, you have to think about the relevance of anything. Because if you're going to do something historical, what's the relevance of doing that?
Although Bridget Berreton's sister did a PhD on the mating habits of red ants.
Right, and that may help persons who are into the insecticide business and that, so that you can make linkages. But I think the first thing has to be, what is relevant now, and what do you think will be relevant in the next 5 years or the next 10 years, and it can be relevance on a number of levels. It can be relevance institutionally, and Simone mentioned that. It can be relevance in terms of the society, and Marlene mentioned that in terms of voting behavior. It can be relevance for you in terms of probably policy related things. It can be relevance in terms of academia. So you have to determine that kind of relevance. And a very cool way to figure that out, if you have, let's say you're doing a mind map or something, and you say, okay, let's say something related to policy, and you say, all right, good. So I want to do something related to policy, public policy. And you start off with some keyword searches in Google. There's this thing in Google, and I was talking to someone this morning about it, where it actually gives you a graph showing the level of relevance of this particular thing from 1800 to now. The number of publications. You can go onto Google again, Google Scholar, and just do some typical keyword searches. But I would advise you, if you're doing those keyword searches, you have a little notepad and you note what the keywords were. And you would sort them based on relevance. And if you realize that over the last 10 years or even 5 years, people, just weren't publishing on this thing, or writing any books or journal articles, then there's a reason why. More than likely, writers have exhausted most of the area and they don't see it as relevant anymore. And that's if you have an external scope. So I think it starts there. I think passion is the other area that, I think we all touched on it in different ways. So after relevance, we think passion. What am I passionate about? When you're doing all of this, you have to really, drum up some internal inspiration and, sometimes create a lot. So, how do you get that passion? And sometimes it's from, your own experiences. So don't ever think, and this is probably one of the fallacies that exist in some research communities, that as a researcher you're supposed to be at arm's length away from your research. But then you have to personalize it. You have to be passionate about this area to say, this is going to create some kind of change or stir some kind of argument or controversy or conflict, and you're trying to resolve. And you have to play that out in your mind. It has to be, so you have to find that. If you're not passionate about something, can we talk about that? You're going to have some challenges there because you need something to fuel you when you are about to give up. Like the persons who perhaps spent 10 years trying to finish up.
Which is your daughter, you need to finish.
So I think once you have the passion and once it's relevant, you start to have conversations. And that's, Marlene and I had conversations. I probably had conversations with most people in here. In some form of fashion. But what, people, depending on, I guess, where you stand in your life, you would have different perspectives about whether you think your research area is, your research area, and that's, territorial. But I think that it's important to have conversations with your peers. And sometimes you will learn so much from just having conversations with your peers. They may tell you...
What I will say to you, though, is that some people think because a peer says to them in a way, this doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Um,
Don't be
no,
offended, yeah.
they get offended.
Yeah.
Your skin
Yeah.
is very thin at this point. And therefore you think, oh, what he telling me? Why he telling me that he feel better?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things you must understand. It's not that people hate you, It's that they're seeing the flaws that obviously you don't see. They're too close to it. So you need to step back and really go with it.
So conversations are important in allowing you to explore those ideas. This morning, for example, there's this humanities undergrad student who's doing a thesis that, I am supervising, and he came and I just saw Cameron around the corner and I said, you're doing so, and Cameron said, yeah, he can look at this book. So, immediately that student, if we didn't have that very cursory conversation on, hey, this is student doing so, you wouldn't get that kind of feedback, and that's important. Sometimes somebody read a book just in passing, and they can contribute to your work. And I think once you do that, you start to build that community of research, which is awfully important.
I think also in the conversation, I seem to think that you should only relate to the supervisor. And I disagree with that. We have a wealth of information on our corridor, for instance. So for instance, you're doing something on voting behavior. Raghunath will be in and out. Hajaki, when you see him, Danny is here, Mukesh Basil is here. It may not make sense to you, but they could tell you something is new. Did you read this article that now came out? Did you see this point of view? And it adds to you as the person. So you don't have to say, okay, I sit down home and I writing. And you writing only for you, and you're not seeing how wrong you're going off. And that's part of your problem. Because you don't want any other person to share this with you. So you're constantly sitting on there like a little shell, and nobody interrelating with you or interconnecting. And you think that's so bright. What I will say to them is always be humble. The humility is extremely important. Learn how to take the boss. Learn how to take the adverse comments. Learn to listen.
Prof, and I would want to add to that in respect of sharing the literature too. We tend to hoard.
Oh yeah.
We tend to hoard whereas your perspective might be different from mine. So in terms of sharing the literature, nothing is wrong with that. Your interpretation and my interpretation is different.
And actually we don't
You
allow
understand?
two people to do the same thesis.
Exactly, but it says that even though you look at the newspaper, you might be able to call a friend, email and say, did you see today's newspaper? And that's what happened, did you hear on the news? So I heard the experts was running a poll. So naturally I have to run and get the newspaper, but if I didn't get one, I have to ask Josh or anybody, did you get a newspaper to give me? You understand? So you share that with you. You don't have to take this whole burden on yourself. But then you can't be selfish too, It's a two-sided affair.
Yeah, two-sided affair.
So just as you get it, you need to be able to give. So you're looking at your thesis, but you also have a friend in mind. So you're reading the newspaper with an open, or other literature for that matter.
And well, I guess I'm probably listening a lot at leading to good conversation. So I think the final thing is really what we all spoke about, and that's reading. And reading widely, it's something that I go through with all
And
my
wisely,
students.
and
wisely, yes, with a purpose. And you have to really read. You don't have a choice. And I think a lot of people just feel that it's sufficient to have passion and conversation and understand relevance, but I don't read. So I would say that reading comes in.
Or read one book.
Oh yeah, read one book and think I'm the super authority on everything, and that is not the right thing to do. Simply because remember you're looking at something, and depending on what angle you're looking at that, just like this barefoot bottle. I am actually seeing lime on this side. None of you can see lime, the word lime on this side. You're actually seeing nutritional facts on this side. This is just an analogy looking at perspective. And that's what reading does. Reading allows you to see things from different angles and different perspectives. And then you can determine which perspective may match you based on your value systems. You start to internalize it, and that's why people start to talk about, when you look at research, the philosophical underpinnings of your research. The epistemological underpinnings of your research. So you start to now flesh that out, because there must be some kind of philosophy some